What's up, y'all? Talon here. Today I'm going to be going over the results from the Victory Road to Honolulu #2, probably the most important grassroots tournament before the World Championship. So if you weren't counting, the World Championship is, I believe, the weekend of the August 14th through the 16th, something like that, which means there's actually only 2 weekends left if you don't include this most recent one. Players only have 2 weekends left to prepare for the World Championship, so starting to get a little tight. People are kind of honing in on which restricted they're at least going to be using for the World Championship, if not a big percentage of their team, at least the 6. So these tournaments are really important. A lot of people are competing in them, trying to collect data, figure out which part of their concepts feel solid, which they want to continue working on for the next 2 weeks, and which parts need to be dropped. So the results from this are very important. However, that's not to say this is going to be truly indicative of the World Championships metagame, because basically all the top players know that the results for these tournaments are posted afterwards, so you don't want to reveal if you have something super spicy, a crazy tech. You don't want to reveal it 2 weeks before the tournament. You want to reveal it at the tournament. But the results nonetheless are pretty interesting. So if you enjoyed these type of analyses, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, helps a ton. And yeah, with all that being said, let's get into a breakdown of this tournament. So before we scroll down, I want to look at actually all the teams in the tournament. So basically, this is a breakdown that Victory Road did of just the top 16 bracket. I'll erase my face for a second so you can see the top right corner. So 2 Calyrex-Ice Rider teams in this corner, one with Indeedee, one with basically both with Tailwind plus Follow Me, and then Chi-Yu, Urshifu, and then a grass type. I'll bring my face back just for emotive purposes. Something we'll notice across a lot of the top cut is actually just the high proliferation of Calyrex-Ice Rider as well as Miraidon. But very interesting to note that there's just so few of Calyrex-Ice Rider when that is a Pokemon that most people had as the strongest restricted. I'm going to be releasing a tier list shortly after this video, maybe later in the week, just with my thoughts on the metagame right now in terms of the restricted tier list. But coming into this tournament, I did actually have Calyrex-Ice Rider as number 1. I think it's definitely probably the restricted people should be paying most attention to coming to the World Championship. But Calyrex-Ice Rider has been, it got its NIAC finish, but people are kind of struggling to deal with the attention that has been brought to it as a result of that. So looking back at the individual teams, the finishes, we have a Japanese player, Taro Okada. I believe they won, I want to say it was the Global Challenge 2 that they won, but yeah, definitely a great performance here, and it's a pretty standard Calyrex Shadow Rider team, aside from the presence of the Indeedee. Looking a little bit closer at the rest of the top 4, Francesco Piopero has a very similar team outside of the Indeedee being a Raging Bolt, so opting for one more Follow Me here, as well as the option to go for Expanding Force with your Calyrex Shadow Rider, ended up being pretty important. Zooming in at the number 1 team itself, we have the Calyrex Shadow Rider going Terra Normal. Francesco also went Terra Normal on his Calyrex, spoiler alert, but that does seem to be the dominant one. People just trying to hedge their bets in the mirror, feeling that Terra Fairy is decent, but most people are not counting on Incineroar to be their Calyrex Shadow Rider counters anymore. And so although they're still running knockoff, there's a lot of ways to, just outplay and get around the Incineroar, maybe stack boost fast enough where you can just KO it with 2 Astral Barrages anyways, and that seems to be the direction a lot of players are going towards, just going Terra Normal, a little worse in a knockoff, but way, way better against opposing Calyrex Shadow Rider. That could potentially even win the mirror all on its own if your opponent does not also have Terra Normal. Outside of that, everything is pretty standard, all the sets. We saw Shohei Kimura also rocking an Ogerpon Heartflame on these Calyrex Shadow Rider compositions. I believe he had a Raging Bolt, I'm not certain about that, on the composition at the last Victory Road tour, but definitely a composition a lot of Japanese players and a lot of Calyrex Shadow Rider players in general are gravitating towards. They're seeing the Ogerpon Heartflame be a fairly strong Follow Me support for the team. It offers a lot of great coverage. You're able to go for a secondary sweeping option against things like Ting-Lu, use your Rillaboom, Ogerpon, and Urshifu to handle those kind of off-meta threats that people slap on their teams to try and beat the Calyrex Shadow Rider. So I think adding a secondary offensive option as well as a support in the Ogerpon has proven to be really effective for a lot of the Calyrex Shadow Riders. I'd expect it to be more or less standardized by the World Championship. Got to be very prepared for that if on these compositions of Calyrex Shadow Rider. Beyond that though, the Indeedee, as I mentioned, very, very important here. I don't think Trick Room is going to be used that often defensively, but against opposing Trick Room teams, you can reverse Trick Room yourself. I think one of the main options that Calyrex-Ice Rider teams is they just switch on the Trick Room mode to try and beat the Calyrex Shadow Rider. If you can just switch that off at any point, they're really counting on all 5 turns of Trick Room. so the Indeedee can be really effective in that matchup. Taunt Urshifu is also really effective at stopping Amoonguss, stopping Calyrex-Ice Rider from getting the Trick Room up. Overall, I think this is a really well-built team. It doesn't have a lot of holes in it, which is kind of what you expect towards the end of a format with such a top-tier restricted Pokemon. We'll see how it fares at the World Championship, but I do think this Ogerpon, Hearthflame, Rillaboom, Urshifu, Incineroar, Calyrex Shadow Rider is definitely the composition that people are looking at to counter for the World Championship, so it's definitely got a big target on its back now. Looking at Francesco's team, it is very similar. We noticed that no Covert Cloak here, but it is a Life Orb set, Terra Normal once again, and a Psychic type secondary move. Usually we see Draining Kiss, but these Psychic ones, I believe it was Psychic or Psyshock on Eduardo Cuna's top 4 at NAIC team, so it does seem like the top Shadow Rider players are gravitating away from the Draining Kiss and towards the Psychic type moves. Beyond that, it is very similar to the first place team. It's still, again, a Stellar Terra, Taunt Urshifu, no Aqua Jet, the Ogerpon with the Grassy Glide to combo off the Grassy Surge. Helping Hand here instead of Will-O-Wisp is actually pretty notable on a Life Orb Nasty Plot Calyrex. I'd imagine you're guaranteeing a KO on Calyrex-Ice Rider after the Nasty Plot. If Life Orb isn't getting it, I think Spell Tag gets pretty close to getting it, but if they're running like a very specially defensive one, you can confirm the KO even further with the Helping Hand, so that is pretty cool. The difference here is the Raging Bolt instead of the Indeedee from the first place team. I think that's a bit more standard, what people are prepping for. Just the very broken combination of Incineroar, Urshifu, Raging Bolt, Rillaboom is just such a potent offensive combination. We're not just seeing it with Calyrex Shadow Rider, it's also on Calyrex-Ice Rider teams. It's just a very powerful combo that everyone really should be ready for at Worlds, but it's just way easier said than done to beat this really synergistic core of Pokemon. Bringing things back to the top 4, it is 2 Miraidon teams. We also have a very similar bunch of Miraidon teams congregated in the top 8. It's what? Wow, actually 5 out of 8 of the top 8 are Miraidon, 3 Calyrex Shadow Riders, just completely dominated this tournament by those two. But I do think that Miraidon is kind of at a disadvantage against Calyrex Shadow Rider teams in general. They usually have a Rillaboom to suppress your terrain. Calyrex Shadow Rider outspeeds the Miraidon naturally, can 2-hit KO it pretty easily with Astral Barrage, so it's definitely a tricky matchup. Not too surprised to see the 2 Calyrex Shadow Riders win in top 4 and proceed to finals, but it is notable how well Miraidon has been doing. I think these teams are built incredibly well. They're kind of figured out the defensive core of Whimsicott, Miraidon, Farigiraf, Iron Hands pretty early on. I think at this point we're not seeing a lot of the Incineroar and Ogerpon cornerstone that were very common earlier on in the format. But most people are congregating on the Urshifu as an offensive option, whether it be the Dark type or the Water type. We're mostly seeing it on these teams. And then the Ogerpon, Hearthflame, very, very common as well. Basically, this team that got 4th place and 6th place, and let's see, yeah, pretty similar in the 8th place team. Get used to seeing it's probably the most dominant Miraidon team that we're going to be seeing at the World Championship. It's at least the one with the biggest target on its back. Diving a bit deeper into one of the top 4 teams, this is the team that JoeUX9 was able to get top 4 with. It's actually running the Terra Electric Miraidon, which a lot of people have switched over to the Dazzling Gleam Terra Fairy one, basically because it handles things like basically Iron Hands, Raging Bolt that would otherwise wall your Miraidon pretty well. This one can handle a little bit, the Dazzling Gleam one can handle a little bit better. This one's still going for all-out electric offense, but it has overheat, which is really interesting because you can overheat and 1-hit KO a Rillaboom trying to override your terrain on switch in, then switch out, and then have electric terrain up for the rest of the battle, and you can kind of just sweep off that. So a player like Joe, who's definitely very capable of making super aggressive reads and catching switches like that, I think it makes a lot of sense for him specifically. I don't know if it will basically spread to other Miraidons. I kind of doubt it, but yeah, definitely a smart pick for him. We also have Grimmsnarl, Iron Hands, Urshifu. I think this is a pretty common combination of Pokemon. Generally, we'll see the Tailwind version or the Grimmsnarl version on these teams. The Grimmsnarl can spread speed control with Thunder Wave in the same way that Tailwind allows you to outspeed stuff, but you can also go for Light Screen and Reflect to allow the already pretty bulky Miraidon defensively to start taking hits even better. Things that would normally just be able to knock it out, like 2 close combats from an Urshifu or like a close combat into a Thunderclap from a Raging Bolt, which are pretty common options to beat Miraidon, and basically just allow the screens to take care of the offensive counters to Miraidon through a defensive means instead of having to go through offensive means like the Miraidon teams typically have to do. Once again, we see an Urshifu with Taunt and no Aqua Jet. That does seem to be a common trend. Volcarona here generally are going to have a Fire type on the Miraidon teams to handle the Rillaboom. This one at least has Overheat on the Miraidon to handle it, but never hurts to have an additional Fire type defensively to switch into Wood Hammers or something like that if you're out of position, or just hit it hard with Fiery Dance. This Volcarona is very offensive. Its Quiver Dance hoping to set up one Quiver Dance, get a Fiery Dance special attack boost, and then suddenly you're doing a great job of beating the opposing Pokemon. If you get one Quiver Dance, you can also outspeed a Urshifu, hit it with a Giga Drain, Terra Grass, 1-hit KO, and heal all the way back to full. So it's a very cool combination. It pairs really well with the screens as well as the fake out from the Iron Hands. And then last Pokemon on the team is the Kingambit. I don't entirely follow why Kingambit is here. Maybe you're worried about Snarls because Intimidate, I feel like this team handles really well. Volcarona, you're not really that worried about Incineroar, but it's a bit pesky. Urshifu, you handle with Surging Strikes extraordinarily well. And then the Miraidon, honestly love seeing Incineroar. Terra Electric Specs of Volt Switch is a 1-hit KO on pretty much all Incin, so not really sure what the Kingambit is doing here, but I know Joe is probably one of the world's best Kingambit players. I'd give it probably either to him or Luca Tregut. They're both really excellent with Kingambit in previous regulations, and so might just be a comfort pick. It does really well into Calyrex Shadow Rider, kinda, if they haven't gotten a boost up. If they do get a boost, they do start 2-hit KOing you probably with the Astro Barrages, so got to be careful with that. But you do have the combination of Kowtow, Sucker, and then Iron Head to be able to hit the Calyrex before it tears, and if it is Terra Fairy, hit it with the Iron Head for a knockout in that aspect. So interesting pick, interesting team. I think it's very well suited to Joe. Might not translate out to other players picking it up and doing well, but glad to see he is in shape for the World Championship, because definitely a great player. I believe he's cut maybe the last two, but yeah, strong player, hoping to see him do well at this Worlds as well. Next up is Gabrielle's team, the other top 4 placing Miraidon. I think this team is definitely really the Miraidon team to be looking out for at the World Championship. It's very similar to the team that Jan Sim, and I believe it might have been Siri, who got second place at basically the regional before NAIC, with basically this team but with Chi-Yu over Ogerpon. Essentially, the Miraidon Terra Fairy set is able to beat the counters to the Miraidon pretty well. I think I went over that before. The Whimsicott set's pretty cool. You can go for Covert Cloak, so you don't have to run the Focus Sash or Protect to get around Fake Out. Then Tailwind to speed up the Miraidon, just really make sure you're outspeeding and knocking out everything, even Choice Scarf Pokemon. And then Encore to basically, if people try to Protect, scout out your Miraidon's moves, you can Encore them into Protect that way. Light Screen is an interesting fold because it allows the Miraidon to tank hits from like Draco Meteor from a Raging Bolt, which would otherwise be very close to a knockout. Now is not getting there. You might be able to even live a Draco into a Thunderclap. And then beyond that, a lot of tools on this team, very standardized at this point. The Iron Hands with the Quark Drive doing incredible damage with Wild Charge, as well as just having a lot of longevity with Drain Punch. The boosted up Drain Punches mean you're doing more damage, you're healing more. It's a really bulky, hard Pokemon to stop. You can also, when you're not attacking, just switch the Iron Hands in and use the Fake Out to pivot your Miraidon in and out a lot more safely, as well as applying Fake Out plus Urshifu, Unseen Fist, Wicked Blow pins as well. It's a very, very strong piece on the team. I'm glad we've kind of moved away from the Incineroar. Even though it was really good at beating the Rillaboom, people have shifted over to fire types like Ogerpon, Hearth Flames, Ivy Cudgel to deal with that a bit more effectively as well. Last Pokemon on the team, I think the Farigiraf everyone's pretty familiar with. I want to point out Psychic Noise. That is a move that's been popping up since that second place team at the European Regional, essentially able to stop a Drain Punch from Iron Hands. Iron Hands Drain Punch is actually like really annoying for these teams because basically you can just Drain Punch an Urshifu. You can really just improve the longevity of your team and be able to outstall the electric terrain, and then the Miraidon isn't that big of a threat anymore. Being able to Psychic Noise it and force it to Wild Charge or Volt Switch out is definitely very nice. You can also stop Pollen Puff healing from Amoonguss. You can stop its Regenerator from activating after it switches, so a lot of utility for just a small bump in power between that and Psychic. Looking at the rest of the top 8 now, Toller Webb, I believe Charlotte Regional Championship, getting 5th place here. I believe he was the 2nd seed, going 8-1 overall in the Swiss portion of the tournament. He has some very interesting picks here on what would otherwise look like a fairly standard team. He has an Assault Vest Chi-Yu, which can serve as a really effective option in the Calyrex Shadow Rider mirror. He has Terra Dark Calyrex Shadow Rider, can't get taunted, Thunder Waved, that's really cool, as well as resisting opposing Calyrex's Astro Barrage. If you're playing a mirror against a Psychic Astro Barrage Calyrex Shadow Rider, and you have Calm Minded Terra Dark, that's really, really in your favor. And then Psychic, once again, a top-performing Calyrex Shadow Rider with Psychic over Draining Kiss. Definitely something to be paying attention to. But yeah, no Nasty Plot, Calm Mind, Life Orb is a very interesting set. You have some passive healing with the Grassy Surge to sort of ignore that. Life Dew on the Clefairy, you have to imagine, is doing a fair bit of work along with Friend Guard to allow the Calyrex to be having enough longevity to get the most out of those Calm Minds and attacks from the Life Orb. Outside of that, we do have the Tailwind mode, so you can just early game go for a fake out with the Rillaboom, bring in the Clefairy, go for as many Calm Minds as you want to, start boosting up as one boost, and then bring the Tornadus in and hit Tailwind. That's kind of a really early Scarlet and Violet combination, but you can definitely do that here. I do like the flexibility of this team, and that seems to be the pace that a lot of these Calyrex-Ice Rider teams are going towards, just maxing out bulk and longevity, pivoting around with things like U-Turn Rillaboom, Parting Shot Incineroar, having Follow Me users like Ogerpon, Clefairy, and Indeedee. And yeah, this team is no exception to that. Very well done by Toller, hoping to see him do well at Worlds this summer as well. I took a look at these remaining Miraidon teams. This one I believe is exactly the same as Gab's here, except it is I think it's Psychic Ferrograph with Tear Water. Beyond that, it's exactly the same. Can't say anything about the EV spreads, but beyond that, it is similar. This team's kind of interesting. It is Life Orb, Ursaluna Blood Moon, pretty standard, and then a Nasty Plot Focus Sash Chi-Yu, so you're boosting. Usually we see Choice Scarf, Terra Ground to win the mirror here. Iron Hand's probably fulfilling that role a little bit more, but kind of an interesting pick. Cool to see them doing well. And then this is the kind of the example of the alternative to this team that got 3rd or 4th and 6th. Normally we have the Whimsicott here, but instead we have what Joe was going for, the Thunderwave Screams, Grimmsnarl to better support the team defensively. I like this a lot just because if you have the Grimmsnarl screens up, you have things Thunderwaved, and you have Electric Train up, not only is Miraidon extremely bulky and difficult to deal with, you can Volt Switch into Iron Hands, which in its own right is so bulky. It's going to do a lot of damage with Drain Punch and just kind of be impossible to knock out. So I do think this is a very cool rendition of the team, and I do expect it to be doing pretty well at Worlds as well. In 9th place, we have this Miraidon team, which isn't really doing a whole lot that's new compared to other Miraidon teams. I think the Ditto is the main deviation. There was a very similar Ogerpon, Chi-Yu, Fluttermane, Raging Bolt team that I believe got near, I want to say it was at the range where it could have caught NAIC, but it didn't on Resistance with something, maybe a Gastrodon over the Ditto. But here we have a Ditto, it's Focus Sash, not Choice Scarf. That's notable. Essentially trying to win the mirror against things like, I don't know, maybe Zamazenta, boosting Pokemon. Not entirely sure what this one's going for the Ditto, since it's not necessarily going to beat a Calyrex Shadow Rider. Maybe it will, just because you tank the Astro Barrage and you knock out everything else. And you don't even have to care about winning the speed tie because of the Focus Sash. So hard to say, but yeah, interesting that the Ditto is on this conventional Miraidon composition. In 10th place, we have Taboo, a Spanish player, definitely very strong, looking out for their performance at Worlds. I believe they're just using Edu's NAIC top 4 team with the Smeargle. I want to say the Raging Bolt is a little bit different. I think it's Booster Energy. I'm not sure if it's the Calm Mind one that Edu had. But this is a Terra Grass Spell Tag Giga Drain Calyrex Shadow Rider. We've actually seen a little bit of that popping up to kind of handle Urshifu a little bit better, heal more than you would with Draining Kiss without having to commit the Terra to do any meaningful amount of damage. So that's pretty cool. There's this Miraidon team that went 7-2, 11th place from Robbie Shage. I believe he's a senior, one of the biggest threats at the Senior World Championship after getting 2nd last year. He has been rocking online tours with this Miraidon Venusaur team. Miraidon with pretty standard is just the Terrifier, Clear Amulet, Covert Cloak, Sleep Powder Venusaur. I want to say it's Focus Sash Chi-Yu, Substitute Ursaluna, and then P2 is like Terra Blast or something. There's definitely a focus here on getting Trick Room up multiple times with the P2 to make sure that the Ursaluna is getting the most out of its time on the field. It's almost like a second restricted with how hard it hits, so definitely prioritizing multiple Trick Rooms makes sense on the P2 over a Farigiraf or something like that, which is focused on just stopping priority and making sure you get Trick Room up guaranteed one time. So quick correction on Taboo's Raging Bolt, it is actually Life Orb, as is Jordy's here. Again with the Giga Drain, Spooky Plate, or Spell Tag set. Very interesting development. I'm not really sure what's given rise to that, but obviously very good at healing against things like Urshifu, not needing, like if they go for a Terra Water, you might not be getting the knockout with Draining Kiss, but with Giga Drain, maybe you get there with Terra Grass. But yeah, dealing with Amoonguss pretty well, very notably, but a lot of the Amoonguss teams have Calyrex-Ice Rider, so you probably don't really care about the Spore Immune if you're getting knocked out by Glacial Lance. And definitely need to get some games in to figure out why it is the Terra Grass, but definitely should be on your radar if you are going into Worlds. Brady Smith, the lone top 16 Terapagos, he was able to at least make it the top 16. Joel over here had a similar composition of Pokemon, but unable to win in the top 32 playoff round. So into the actual team now. I don't want to go into a lot of details. It is a bunch of standard things, notably Protect Tornadus and Flamethrower Calm Mind Terapagos. I think this is very cool because basically one of the easiest counters to Terapagos in my opinion is just Spore Amoonguss. You get a Spore off on this guy, you have enough turns to kind of like deal with it, Parting Shot it, down back to a reasonable level of special attack, and then you can just hit it with a close combat later on, especially if you get good sleep turns. But if you get a Calm Mind up, the way Terrestrialization works on Terapagos is you never lose the Stellar Boost on your other moves, so you're just consistently hitting with a Stab, +1 Flamethrower. If you get 2 up, you're just knocking out Amoonguss, getting pretty close to Rillaboom, so I do like that option a lot. Don't really see a lot of usage for Earth Power when you have an Urshifu on the team to take the knockouts, but yeah, you could be a little bit weaker to opposing Incineroar just because you don't have the option to go for that Stellar Boosted Earth Power. So kind of just picking your poison. Do you want to knock out Incineroar, or do you want to knock out Amoonguss? And Brady chooses Amoonguss in this circumstance. Naoto's 15th place. It is a Choice Scarf Chi-Yu with a Terra Normal Hyper Beam Calyrex-Ice Rider, so that is going to hit crazy hard in Beads of Ruin, just immediately giving you a boost. And if you have a Follow Me Pokemon to give you a turn to charge up, suddenly you're just hitting with Life Orb Astral Barrages after those Terra Normal Hyper Beams and having the option to go for another after you've gotten a few more boosts. So really crazy offensive options there. The final person in the top 16 is Alessandro Fantinato with a Zamazenta team, the only Zama to make the top 32 bracket, go X and 2 essentially, and was able to win the win and in and make it into the top 16. It is a very offensive variant. We have a Grassy Seed, or not a Grassy Seed, but the Miracle Seed Rillaboom to boost up your Grassy Glides. It boosted even further. I think it's Terra Grass, I'm not certain. With the Sword of Ruin on the Chen Pao, Choice Band Entei with Terra Normal Extreme Speed, an Inner Focus, a Booster Energy Flutter Mane, and then a Choice Scarf Ditto. So very, very offensive combination of Pokemon, and it is the Wide Guard Zamazenta. I won't be able to go into a lot of the details of the Pokemon just because this video is going to run a little long anyways, but Wide Guard Zamazenta, I believe I checked, and it was any player that went 5-2 or better in the first day of competition and then made it to the second day of competition. We're running Wide Guard Zamazenta. No Iron Defense Zamazenta made it, so really, really good conversion rate for Wide Guard Zamazenta. I think it is the best set personally. I've been singing its praises over Iron Defense. I think the Iron Defense set is way, way worse poised in the metagame against all these spread type broken restricted Pokemon like Calyrex-Ice Rider, and kind of proving that in practice here in this tournament. I feel like Kazuki's team in 17th place is notable in that there's an Entei with Assault Vest. There's also a Life Orb Chen Pao, so interesting to see that, Chi-Yu and Incineroar are definitely the dominant fire types, as well as Ogerpon, but Entei is definitely starting to find some usage in this late format. Just the ability to 1-hit KO Rillaboom with Sacred Fire, be immune to the Incineroar Fake Out cycling is definitely very appreciated, and potentially be able to Sacred Fire burn an Urshifu if they aren't Choice Scarf before they can move, and then tank a Surging Strike or just generally really hurt their defensive output. So interesting to see Entei doing so well, I would say. And then in 17th place, we have a Terapagos with a very interesting set. So the Terapagos is running Substitute Leftovers, which I really like with Rillaboom, just because one, you're able to substitute in front of something like a Spore from Amoonguss, which can otherwise be really devastating to deal with. And two, you can go for a Substitute. If it isn't broken, you can go for a Protect and then go back up to full HP, at which point people will have to be dealing with Terra Shell while they're trying to break your Substitute, which is definitely a very tall order, kind of hard to do. So I do like that combo a lot, just because I'm a big fan of Amoonguss. That's definitely the one that is most annoying for me to play against. Beyond that, not a lot of super interesting things. I think Taunt Urshifu, once again, not a lot of Aqua Jet in this top cut. People are recognizing that just the utility of Taunt can sometimes be a little bit better than Aqua Jet. Not a ton of Focus Sash in the metagame, so Aqua Jet is getting a little less useful to pick off those Focus Sashes for sure. Ogerpon Heart Flame, once again, another huge performance, probably one of the standout performers that people weren't expecting coming into Worlds. The Ogerpon Heart Flame has been skyrocketing in usage, got to be on the watch for that. Then the Flutter Mane with a very supportive set of Icy Wind, Thunder Wave, Shadow Ball to pressure Calyrex-Ice Rider to go for the Terrestrialization, and then you're probably just going to Thunder Wave them anyways, but and then you can knock them out with a Terra Starstorm later in the game. So a lot of synergy on this team. Unfortunately, weren't able to win in the top 32 tiebreaker match, but still did make it to the final stage of the tournament, so strong performance. Looking at the rest of the teams though, I'm not going to go into detail on any of them. I am actually going to be featuring some of them on the channel as team recreation, so please subscribe if you're interested in seeing those. I'm actually going to be covering, where is it? The Miraidon Calyrex-Ice Rider team that beats Miraidons pretty well. This Dondozo Weezing Regigigas team, which is really cool. And then lastly is a Kyogre Hyper Offense team with Serena and Basculegion. Very cool team. If you want to look at the rest of these teams, I will have this page linked in the description below. But last thing we're going to do is actually look at the composite usage stats for the tournament. In terms of restricteds, yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the Calyrex-Ice Rider did very, very poorly. Didn't even convert into the basically the 7-2 final stage of the tournament, all of them went 6-3 or worse in the tour. Converted kind of evenly, a little negatively from day 1 to day 2. Calyrex-Ice Rider, a bit positive. Miraidon, very positive, a 50% bump between 14.2 to 21%. And then the rest of the Pokemon, I guess Zamazenta is the most notable in doubling its usage stat from day 1 to day 2. Lastly, I want to look at some of the outliers in the overall usage stats. So starting from the bottom, now we're here. Volcarona honestly didn't have a lot of usage, but converted pretty well into day 2 with a 5.8 percent bumping up to 10%, so nearly double. Grimmsnarl a little bit better, but still I think Grimmsnarl one of the Pokemon to be watching out at the World Championship. It just got second at NAIC. People are really appreciating the light screen bulk augmentation as well as the kind of RNG edge that Thunderwave gives you. I definitely think that's a huge portion of it. Amoonguss, I want to note, really doing not well. It actually converted negatively from day 1 to day 2. I'm Amoonguss's #1 biggest fan, but it does not do that well into Miraidon outside of the redirection. Rillaboom definitely much more favored in the Miraidon team, so if outside of the Calyrex Shadow Rider teams that naturally have a pretty strong matchup in Miraidon, hasn't been seeing a lot of usage. Scrolling down to this side, Fluttermane not doing well, Miraidon we did cover doing very well, and it's kind of counterpart the Ogerpon. Heartflame, similar stats going from 14.6 to 21% in day 2. Really incredible performance for Heartflame. Outside the Miraidon team was not particularly on a lot of people's radar, but now also popping up on Shadow Rider teams. Just a very dangerous Pokemon that you need to be ready for. As a defensive follow me Pokemon, the Terrifier Grassy Glide combo with Rillaboom, once again popping up, and of course the Terrifier Ivy Cudgels, one at KOing Rillaboom, which can otherwise cause problems to things like Miraidon or Calyrex Shadow Rider teams. Moving up a little bit, Tornadus doing pretty poorly, converting negatively, so the hyper offensive Tailwind team's not doing that well. And then for Farigiraf, doing really well in Incineroar, Raging Bolt, Urshifu, Rillaboom, all converting very positively. Not really so surprising, but yeah, just confirming what we already know. These 5 incredibly potent Pokemon and supporters in the metagame for most restricted, so have to be considering them on your team and how to beat them when you are building against them. So that's going to do it for our breakdown today. I went a little bit more in depth than I usually do just because I think, World is coming up. Maybe I provide some insight for some of the players there for the first time, or even more veteran players who wanted to see things from a different angle. I just wanted to provide as much insight as I could before the tour, try and help everyone out. But if you guys enjoy these type of videos, these breakdowns of the metagame, please subscribe, give the video a like to show your support, and with all that being said, peace y'all.